And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us. And one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it. And that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back, Foil Fanatics. I'm your host, Brandon Wright. Tonight's episode, we're going to be joined by my guest, Rich. Rich is from Founding Lore Fathers podcast, and he's on here tonight to talk about the Amityville horror incidents. Before we bring Rich on, though, if you have a story or experience you want to share, you can always reach out to the Tinfoil Tales podcast at gmail.com, or you can go to tinfoiltales.com and there's a contact button. But whatever, if you would like to be on an upcoming episode, be sure to send me a message, send me an email, we get something scheduled. Make sure to reach out to us on all the Instagram, Facebook, whatever social medias are out there. If you want to help the podcast out, make sure to share it around. That is the best way to help grow the podcast. You can leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcast at. That helps with rankings and making the podcast more discoverable. So I definitely appreciate all the stuff you guys have been doing for me out there, helping out. But I think now we're going to bring Rich on. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to take this time to welcome my guest, Rich. Rich, thanks for coming on here and talking with me tonight.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're all doing well today or tonight, whenever you decide to listen to this podcast. And Brandon, you mentioned this being your first recording and it being a bit awkward. I want you to know that I excel at awkward. And hopefully I can make this as smooth of a transition as possible for you tonight.
Yeah, usually I've never done an interview for my own show. I guess I take that. I have, but we've never used the actual video. Like, I've been on a Zoom call and someone's like, can you have your camera on? It's weird talking to no one. I was like, no, I prefer it that way. But
well, I know it's a big step for you. So I appreciate you including me on this momentous step with the Tinfoil Tales podcast.
I'm always the type of person that I'm like, I don't want people looking at me. That's just not how I am.
You know, I completely understand that, so we, before we get too far in, so I'm 1/3 of the Founding Lore Fathers podcast. I do a show with 2 of my best friends, and we talk about weird stuff. And we tried doing a true crime podcast, and it was extremely depressing. I don't know how people make a living doing that, because I just can't talk about people getting slaughtered like that. But anyways, we have a YouTube channel that we do not use because it is a bit odd putting our face out there talking about some of the strange stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So I completely understand that. And, even if this only turns into an audio only podcast, I'm okay with that as well.
As of right now, I'm kicking around the idea of releasing this on video. So hopefully, like I said, with my other podcast, Dark Side of the Scene, we're doing live streaming. So every Wednesday night, people can come see me and my co-host talk to band people and look like jackasses. But
that's awesome. That's awesome, dude. So before we start diving into this, the story about the Amityville horror, I want to tell you that I've listened to several of your shows, and there was one show in particular that I have a gripe with you about. And that's the interview you did with the guy who was part of a vampire cult. He was a photographer for Vampire Cult or something like that.
Oh, yeah, that was the recent one.
So he came out and started talking about the BDSM side of their vampire sex cult. And you stopped asking him questions about his BDSM vampire sex cult. So for future reference, and some of us want to know more about that situation. So if you come across somebody who's willing to talk about their vampire sex cult, please push them on that matter.
Yeah, I try not to pound any agenda into what I do. So like, if they didn't want to bring it up, I'm not going to ask about it just because I don't want to push anyone like a certain direction.
Oh, I understand completely, man. Well, so let's dive into this Amityville horror stuff. So
I know a
I
little bit
know,
about the background of it. Like, I'm trying to think what the guy's actual name is.
well, I think it's safe to assume that all horror fans and anyone born in the 70s or 80s knows about the story,
Mm-hmm.
or at least has heard some references to it. But that said, I recently watched a movie on Netflix called the Family Switch. Now it's a decent comedy. It's a Christmas movie, so if you're not into it right now, that's fine. Wait till next year. But there's a line in there it made my wife actually laugh out loud, which is a rare thing for her. So Ed Helms, he's the father in the movie. He's playing a music teacher, and he's trying to motivate his class, and he wants them to play with his heart. And he makes a Star Wars analogy about how Luke Skywalker was able to take down the Death Star. And the student looks him square in the face and says something like, "I was born in 2010. I don't know what you're talking about." So, for the listeners out there who have never heard of the Amityville Horror, there's about 10 books. Actually, probably more than that. Ton of books that are out there. There's more than 20 films that are out there. And anytime you see a spooky house on a hill with like a red roof on it, it's some random show. 9 times out of 10, they're making a reference to the story. And if any of the listeners out there are interested, feel free to hop on the YouTube. There's actually several free movies that are on there. You usually have to watch with some ads, but you don't need to pay for anything to watch some of these movies. Now, the condensed version of the story is that a family with a few kids buys a house where the previous owners had been viciously murdered by one of their kids. Now, the people quickly find out the house is haunted as fuck, and this weird demonic spirit starts toying with them. He even yells at a priest, and then, like sane people, they bail and move out of the house within a month. Now, at least some of that's true. Now, the house is real, and it is located in Long Island. The story we know comes from a book titled The Amityville Horror, written by Jay Anson, and is published in September of 1977. Now, Anson wrote this book based on over 45 hours of recordings given to him by the previous owners, George and Kathleen Lutz. She goes by Kathy. Now, these are the second homeowners, and they were the ones that were allegedly chased out of the home. And interesting nugget about this is that Anson never actually interviewed the Lutz family. He did all of this based on the recordings that they provided to them. And before we dive too deep into their story, I think it's important that we talk about the Defoes or the DeFeos. I don't know how to pronounce their name, but they were the previous family. DeFino. There you go.
As I've heard it called.
I'll go with that. I'll be honest with you, Brandon, I'm not good with words. Sometimes they elude me. So I will do my best to try to get that right.
You do a podcast and you're not good with words.
Well, science and math and, there's things out there that I excel at.
Words are not them.
Yeah, words are not one of them. And that's why, we're not a professional outfit over at the Founding Lore Fathers. We're very much an amateur radio show.
That's literally me here.
Well, so the DeFeos family, they're a family of 7. They lived in this large colonial style house. And from one side, it kind of looks like a face. The house looks creepy. But I say that the same way, like, people see pictures of like serial killers and they talk about how like their eyes are dead or there's no emotion behind them. But if you had seen their picture on a dating profile, you probably would have thought they were cute. It's the context that kind of makes it creepy there. Now, tragically, on November 14th of 1974, the family's oldest son, Ronald DeFeo Jr., shot both of his parents and all 4 of his siblings. He then took a shower, changed his clothes, and walked to a nearby bar and said, "You've got to help me. I think my mother and father are shot." Now, Robert Defoe he's an adult at this point. He's not like a 16-year-old or something like that. And it's pretty clear that he's got some mental issues. Now, someone at the bar called the cops, and then a few of the people at the bar walked back to the house, presumably to see if they could save anybody. But when the police arrived, they started their investigation. DeFeo presented them with a very bizarre story. He claimed that a hitman who was angry at his uncle took out the family. Now, apparently, his uncle was actually a capo in the Genovese crime family. One of those words. And he actually named the person. So like, I mean, there's a legit hitman that he named. And so it's kind of a weird nugget of information there. Now, I'm not actually going to name him because I couldn't find anything about him being an actual hitman. But I also didn't find anything that said he wasn't. So
No.
now, naturally, they took him down to the station for both his safety and to interrogate him. Now, I've seen you spend some time on Reddit. Could you imagine if like this was back when body cams were around? Like that place, it would be all over the place. So I probably would have spent several hours watching body cam of them talking to this guy, spewing about a hitman.
Right now, I've been watching the UAP shit on there.
The squid one,
the jellyfish, and then I've been trying to
Jellyfish.
figure out this aliens down in Miami Mall.
I am not familiar with the aliens in the Miami Mall.
No, that's a big thing that happened last week.
We'll probably have to talk about that. There are lots of weird things that happen in Miami. You know, actually, so one of their non-conspiracy related, one of their city councilors just had a federal judge ordered the U.S. Marshals to seize all of his property and all of his assets because he was being caught up in a decades long corruption case, and he's time after time been found doing fraud. It's Miami's a fun place, man. So if there are aliens, I hope they don't land there. I hope they land somewhere else. Maybe not Kentucky. Kentucky will shoot them.
This it's completely off topic, but like the Miami thing, it is there was a shitload of cops that rolled into it. Like they had like 100 different cops, and come to find out, they claim it's 4 teenagers causing a fight or whatever and throwing fireworks at people. That's what the authorities are saying happened, but a lot of people are saying there was 8-foot tall aliens zooming, like humanoid creatures coming in and out, almost like transparent then not transparent, then like walking through walls and all sorts. It sounds like in and out of existence. I was like, that sounds really freaking weird. But I don't know.
And they blamed it on a group of teenagers?
Yeah, the police and everything are saying it was like 4 or 5 teenagers were arrested or something like that. I don't know.
Do you know if they had a dog?
I didn't hear anything about a dog.
Okay, well, usually groups of teenagers carry dogs. They're usually the ones who solve those problems, not create them. So, showing my age there with my little Scooby-Doo joke.
I was a little confused for a second when you said they have a dog. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Nah, I didn't mean to mess with you there, man.
No, but that's
I have one of those personalities.
So, back to the Amityville, before we jump into that, it's kind of strange. Where I live at now, I'm only a few miles from a town called Hoover. It's not even really a town. And I can't think of what the guy's name is, but I think back in, I don't know if it was the 70s, maybe in the 60s, but years back, it was similar to what happened with the Delfino guy. He literally had killed his family. Then he went down the road and killed the rest of his family. And then they had him locked up in like the Logansport State Hospital for murdering his family. But everyone said he was just off his medications. He heard voices and everything else. He wasn't on his meds. And I can't think of what his name is. I've looked it up because it's only like 5-10 miles from here. So it's like, it's strange that that's very similar and almost, I think, around the same time frame as the original Delfino murders were too. The guy heard voices that made him go and kill his whole family, then go down the street and kill his brother and his family.
Well, I can tell you schizophrenia is a real thing, man. There's actually an incredibly powerful video that I watched where it's a somebody who was recently released from prison, a schizophrenic person. He's said he was walking down the street and this woman came out and begged him for help, saying that somebody was inside trying to kill her family. And he goes inside, and one way or another, she convinced him to burn the house down. And so he lit the house on fire, and all of that happened in his head, except for the fact that he actually burned down a house and just was wrong. His medications was wrong. So it's crazy how someone can have those wires crossed in their head, and it's an unfortunate thing, man. It happens.
Yeah.
Usually they don't end up in weird situations like the Amityville case, because that seems, it gets real fucking weird real quick here. But anyways, so after the cops have him in the station and everything, I mean, it became apparent that this dude was just straight up lying. So the following day, he confessed to the killings. He said, "Once I started, I just couldn't stop. It went so fast." When he finally made it to trial, his lawyers provided an affirmative defense, which apparently is legalese for they're making an argument that DeFeo didn't like. So his lawyers were saying his lawyers and psychologists were saying that he was insane and addicted to heroin. Meanwhile, DeFeo was claiming self-defense because the voices were telling him what to do. So this case is particularly interesting because the family was shot. It's kind of muddy. So he was using a 35 caliber gun, and anyone who knows anything about guns, that's a loud pop. And the family apparently didn't know what was happening. They were all shot in their beds. So there's some speculation that it wasn't exactly what it seemed. And there have been a couple of books that were written about this. And, one of them is extremely sketchy, but they make the case that the mom was involved as well. So it really is. It's a pretty disturbing thing.
There was a documentary I watched a few years ago, and I'm pretty sure Delfino's still alive, isn't he?
I think I read about like 9 people in this. Several of them are dead now. He may or may not be alive.
I don't remember when this. I don't remember when this was filmed or when I watched it, but I swear they were still talking to him, and they were saying that he really was hearing demons. And I forget the documentary. I'd have to find it, but I remember something about watching it, and they were trying to say that he wasn't. It's not that he didn't do it, and it's not that he's even not schizophrenic, but he was actually hearing the demonic things making him do that.
Well, so the events that happened afterward make for a compelling case. So I just did a quick check. So he passed away in 2021. So there were, like you mentioned, there's a documentary that's out there. There's a few different stories that are out there. And what I took away from this is that this was a deeply disturbed person whose story changed multiple times throughout it. So I know in the years after the trial, like before he actually passed away, so he did multiple interviews, and he even requested a new trial at one point. But his events, they literally changed every time he opened his mouth. And, we'll never really know what actually happened. But, if we knew exactly what went through his head, we probably wouldn't understand it anyways, because this is it's just one of those tragic situations where it happened around the same time as the satanic panic was becoming a thing. So there was a weird period in American culture where anyone who mentioned something demonic, they immediately got on talk shows, they got on the news, they did that. This is where you see Ed and Lori and Warren rise to fame. It's it's kind of hard to say what happened, because in my mind, this really is it's a dude just snapped and murdered his family. It's one of the things that have happened.
I actually just interviewed someone recently. The episode's out. It was about alien abduction, but during the beginning of it, the guy talked about how just recently, within the last few years, his dad passed away, and his brother, for whatever reason, decided to take a shotgun and shoot the cats, his mom, and then himself. I was like, oh, that took a very dark turn instantly. I wasn't expecting her to talk about aliens. And
Dude, that came out of left field.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting you to say that.
Yeah.
So,
but that was like in
yeah,
the
good
last
job.
4 or 5 years ago. I was like, Jesus. So
Yeah, well, it's something that happens. And when we start talking about these demonic things and we start talking about some of these alien things, one of the things that I found through just researching topics for our show is that pop culture generally fuels these type of stories. So we have like the alien craze going on, but this is also like this is back in the 70s Cold War era.
mhm.
So this is also when we start seeing movies like Encounters of the Third Kind come out. This is when we start seeing people showing up and doing like weird hypnotism just to see like, putting facts in people's minds before for them to become reality. And then we have the satanic panic. So we start seeing these people talking about people being possessed. We start seeing like real life crimes being blamed on cults, things like that. So that leading to the people believing that he had actual demonic things is it's just I think that's more of a byproduct of pop culture. It's I don't know. I don't like talking about this stuff right now, especially the suicide part of it. But so this is also when the Lutz family gets involved in the story. So I'm gonna draw some of this information from Anson's book, and there's a few interviews I've seen and read from the family, but I do want to take a quick aside before we get into the heart of the story by saying that the real estate agent who sold them the house was a master saleswoman. According to Anson, when she showed the Lutz the house, she knew it was out of their price range, but she said, "quote I wanted to show them how the other half lived." So it was only after she did the tour that she let them know that this was the DeFeo house. She then asked, like, I wonder if I should have told you which house this was before or after after you saw it. Then she added that she would like to know for future references when clients come looking for the house in the range of $90,000. So she baited it. She's like, she baited this dude hardcore into this. Now, I mean, George is the George Lutz. He clearly had no choice but to buy the house after the agent questioned his ability to afford a cursed death trap. But George, I mean, he was such a good negotiator that he even got the agent to let him keep some of the furniture that was abandoned by the previous homeowners. And that honestly sounds like a sleazy car salesman who calls cigarette burns on the seats like character marks. So
Yeah.
hats off to that woman, dude. she wheeled and dealed their way into that one. So now that George had established his manhood by purchasing the gateway to hell, his wife did the only reasonable thing. She invited a Catholic priest to bless their house. Now, this is where the facts get blurry and the fiction really starts to kick up. And according to the Lutz family, the priest who was given the pseudonym Father Manisalco, uh, when he started splashing the holy water on the walls, a masculine voice famously said, "Get out." And like a real asshole, he didn't say shit about it to the family.
Why would he?
They I just didn't say anything
Yeah.
about it. They even invited this shady bastard to stay for dinner, and he politely declined and dipped the fuck out. So it's his story continues. So later that day, the priest is driving from his mom's house or whatever, and the car experienced several issues, including the hood breaking loose and slamming into the windshield while he was driving. When he pulled over, the car wouldn't start, and he got a mechanic to come check it out. And when the mechanic got a hold of it back at his shop, he turned it on. The windshield wipers would not stop moving. They were completely out of control. And again, this asshole didn't tell the mechanic that he was working on a haunted car.
I'm trying to remember the movie. Didn't something like that happen in the movie too?
Yeah, so there's several movies that are out there. So the movie actually, I think, does a pretty good job staying true to the book. Now, obviously, it's a movie, so they take
Yeah.
some liberties with the information, but I think they did a pretty good job. You know, how much of the book is true? That's debatable. So, but yeah, the priest definitely had this experience. But I just want everyone out there who's listening to know that if you that you have a duty to tell people that something's haunted. It's okay for them to call you crazy, but it's not okay for you to give a haunted ass car to somebody just for shits and gigs. So just be cautious with that. So at the same time, like this car's going wild. This is like day one of the house, right? The Lutz family dog, his name's Harry, which is a great dog name, by the way. He managed to jump over a fence and it caused him to strangle itself with his collar. And then the family radio stopped working and started pitching out screaming, high pitched noises. And luckily, they were able to save the dog's life. But it was a weird start to their first day in the new house. And then over the next couple of days, things only began to get weirder. So George he started hearing knocking at the door every night around 3:15 in the morning. Yeah, but there was never anyone around. He just assumed the kids were struggling to adjust to the new house. And they were probably moving around a little bit in their beds. That was until one night when the dog began to lose its mind. It was barking at the door, and when George went outside on the cold December night, he saw a shadow moving around his boathouse. And this is the first time the alleged spirit had been like made visible to the family, at least to George anyway. Now, the next day, Kathy was sitting in the kitchen writing in her journal when she had a strange feeling that somebody was staring at her. And when she looked around, she found her young daughter at the top of the stairs, just looking down at her mother. Her hair was draped over her face, and she told her mom that she wanted to go home. Now, I'm picturing this like moment in my mind, and I can only imagine it must have been odd for Kathy, but I've got a daughter myself, and she's definitely looked scary as shit on more than one occasion. So I probably wouldn't have thought anything of it. Like my daughter, she's got blonde hair, long blonde hair, and there's been more than one occasion where she's walked into my bedroom and just stared at me, like trying to wake me up when she was younger, like she was a child of the corn. So I'm like, I don't know, little girls, they could definitely do some weird shit.
I'm
man.
surprised.
So I wouldn't think anything of this.
I'm surprised at one point I have not straight up punched one of my kids for scaring me at one point. Or just because of how creepy they can be, waking me up.
So I'm a retired firefighter, man, and loud noises it was for a long stretch. I overreacted to loud noises. It was like it was like a roof was collapsing on me. It was just my heightened sense like that. And I damn near punched my daughter one time. She came out, boom. Ah! I was like, oh shit. I came out like this and she dodged, I didn't swing that hard. I didn't actually punch my daughter in the head, but that was the closest I've actually come to hitting her. I did actually punch my brother in the face one time when we were younger. I was passed out on the couch and he comes up. He's like, Hey Rich. He's like, he like hits my head. I just wake up instinctively, just throw the weakest left hook you've ever seen. Caught him in the cheek though.
So
he stopped waking me up by the face after that though.
Funny story. That's funny to me now, but felt bad when it happened. I was at a haunted house, and this was probably 20 years ago now. And I saw one of the guys, like it was not a haunted house, like a real haunted, but it was like one of those dressed up to scare you haunted houses or whatever. I saw the kid going around the corner, so I knew he was going to jump out, try to scare us. So I was expecting him. I was not expecting the one on the other side to come out. So I'm looking this way. He jumps out. I'm like, oh, yeah, there you are. And the other one jumps out from behind me. And I instinctively just turned and right in his face. He was just a kid. He was a teenager. I was probably only like 20, 21 at the time. But he was still a little younger than me. And I felt terrible because when we got out of the haunted house, he was outside doing this. His nose was busted. He was wearing a mask, but I punched him through the mask. I busted his nose.
Oh, dude, that's terrible.
So the kid was probably like maybe 15. I was like, uh-oh. It's like, sorry, man. He's like, it's okay. Like,
So I wonder if they get hazard pay, like if their boss is like showing up bonuses for each time they get knocked in the face.
like, I don't know what, like, I was just my instinct. I instantly just swung, got scared and swung.
Yeah, it's just sucks, man. I went to the only real one I've been to, wasn't even a real, it was a haunt. It was Carowinds down in South Carolina. It's on the North Carolina, Charlotte, but it's North Carolina, South Carolina border. And they did a Scarowinds situation. We went down, I don't know, 18, 19. So I was around the same age as you, man. That was a great experience. I would never do it again, but it was fantastic, especially at that age. So,
I haven't been to one.
yeah,
Well, I take that. I did go to one, not this past Halloween, but in 2022, I took my nephew to one. And they do one here in our town. They have the old school, and they always decorate it up for Halloween every year. But other than that, like, my wife doesn't like to go to that type of stuff. The kids don't like it either, so I don't have anyone to go with.
you can't, at this point, we can't be the creepy old guys going to haunted houses, punching little kids, you know what I mean? It's a very different story being a 22-year-old punching an 18-year-old and being a 30-plus-year-old, you know? So,
Yeah.
oh, man. Oh, but yeah, back to the stories. This is when the girl comes down, she's all scary and shit, right? Now, at this moment, George lost his temper and he slapped the table. Now, he was a strict person, and the sudden abruptness of it all was, at least according to Kathy, out of character for him. Now, the kids, on the other hand, they would describe him as abusive multiple times in their adulthood, but for the story's sake, this is the beginning of an aggressive pattern that would start and end while George was in the house. And so over the next couple of days, the demon would step up its game. Like it turned all the toilet water pitch black, made the house smell bad. It just sprinkled little cold spots throughout the house. And then one day it decided to unleash thousands of flies. Now, if you believe the house itself was possessed, it doesn't matter which part of its body would be the toilet, but I can assure you that it's rude to use the bathroom on somebody. So in this case, I totally agree with the house's reaction. Now,
Do you have a question?
Go ahead.
The flies. Did it say what month that happened in?
This is December.
Okay.
So this happens over the course of 28 days.
I have my own little theory about flies. Where I used to work, we had a room, and there was a little heater in it that we had to keep it warm. Basically, I used to plow snow. I used to work for the state highway department, and I had to have plow snow. Well, we made salt brine in this old little room we had. That room had a little heater that we ended up putting in there to keep it warm. When we heated it up, when it was so cold, every single fly in existence was in that room, and it was in the window. There was like hundreds of flies all over the window just because of the warmth. So what if they were ever like frozen there from the winter time, just warming them up? So I was just kind of wondering, I was like, I know there's so many flies, like if it's in a cold month, maybe because it got warm in there, they all like thawed out and they were just all migrating to where the warmth was. I don't know.
So that is a possibility, right? So there are different lenses through which this story gets told. Now, one of the sons, and from what I can tell, he's the only one to actually go on record outside of his parents to explain the situation and what happened to him in his view. And granted, he was a kid at the time. In his telling of the story, there was a situation where there were flies all around him, and he had taken a newspaper and he had swatted through, killing hundreds of them. And when he went to get help from his mom, he came back, the flies were gone. So is there a logical explanation for the flies being there? I'm sure there is. Or, this is something that the Lutz family just made up,
No.
and it sounds good,
So I just know
So,
from
I
experience, there's, even at one of the other places, the offices that we had, there was when it got really cold, when it started to warm up, the whole place was infested with flies. It's just, we went around with a vacuum cleaner and we're just like vacuuming them out of the windows because there's so
Man,
many.
so we had actually I got a couple of little stories here. So I remember probably one of my favorite days in life. It was absolute boredom. I was 20, 21. And back in the day I enjoyed left-handed cigarettes, a little puff pass here and there. And that's how I was spending my day off. And my roommate had a dog, and we had this. So we lived in a cinder block house out near the Sound in North Carolina. Across the street was the landlady's house, and she would only show up every once in a while. But I made sure she wasn't home this weekend, so I'm just out there and I'm enjoying myself. And my roommate's dog had spent the night out there before, and so there was some dog poop. We cleaned it up and everything, but the flies had come in. Man, I bet you I spent 2 hours of my life just killing flies. It was, just a great way. It's just one of those afternoons I just killed that way. But now, less depressing than flies is ladybugs. So where we're
I
at,
hate
we
them
will
fuckers.
have you can hate them all you want, man. They're still pretty to look at. The they were, so I was in pest control for, I don't know, 6-7 years, and every year around this time we would get our fake spring or our fake winter, and so like everything would die and then everything would come back to life, like just like that. We used to get calls all the time about like hordes of ladybugs coming in through the windows, and there would just be a mass like kill site of ladybugs in the windows where they'd come alive, went to the windows and froze again and died. So yeah, bugs are weird, man.
Yeah.
That's
That happens to us every fall. It seems like every window and door for the garage or whatever, the one door going outside was literally infested with dead bugs because I went through and I sprayed so much bug killer and barrier or whatever all the way around the place, all around the seals and everything. So when you open up that door, there's just dead bugs laying in between the glass door and the garage door.
Yeah, there's something about killing bugs, man. It's very satisfying, because especially as a married person, you're gonna catch shit if you see a bug in your house.
I used to
So
pay.
taking care of that problem early.
We were paying for Orkin up until the last few months, and then I said, I'll do it myself because I don't feel like they're having that great of a job. Then I was still finding random ass spiders and stuff in the basement, and that's where I'm at now. Is the basement.
Basements are hard.
Well, I'm in the basement
I'll
now, but I bug bombed the shit out of it a couple weeks ago.
I'll give you some recommendations offline.
Right.
Some things you can do here and there. That was something I really picked up quite a few. I learned quite a bit doing that. So now, so like up until this point, like it was really just in the story, anyways. George and the priest were the ones who like really think this place is haunted. I mean, they've only been in the house for just a handful of days, and there were obviously minor small things, stuff like that happened that everyone thought was kind of weird. And that was until the night of December 23rd. Everyone had to come around to the idea that something was seriously wrong. See, that night, at 3:15, something ripped the door off the home and unleashed the full brunt of a mild New England winter into the family's house. Now, after dealing with the nightmare, the next morning, the daughter began to hum an unfamiliar tune while staring at the boathouse. Now, she started saying weird shit like, "Do angels talk to you?" And the brothers had gotten into an actual fist fight. And according to Kathy, all the crosses in the house had been turned upside down. It's a lot of red flags going on here, dude, especially right around the holidays. Now, I will say, so Christmas would come and pass with, just a few minor incidents here and there. Just, I guess the asshole that was haunting them took a break. Everyone gets a winter break, I guess. But it was after the new year that, shit really started to hit the fans. Like, so the house began to really stink, and the family went around to open up all the windows. And then one of the kids named Danny, the one who gave the interview, had his fingers smashed in the window with such force that it actually shattered the bones in his hand. Now, it took multiple family members to force the window off of his hand, and when he was finally free, the family rushed him downstairs to begin the first aid process. Then, according to Danny, the door flung wide open, and a spirit walked in. According to him, the apparition bumped into his mom. It walked through his hands, knocking over a knife on the table, and then sat down right next to them. And as quickly as it entered, it disappeared. Now, according to Danny, his hand was the size of a baseball glove. And suddenly the swelling went down and his hand returned to normal with the exception of his pinky. Now, there's actually a full documentary centered around Danny and what his experiences were. It's titled My Amityville Horror. And listening, you actually, it's one of the ones available on YouTube. And listening to him tell the story, it's actually quite chilling. So like you can hear in his voice just how deeply disturbed the guy is. And it's hard to say what actually happened when you listen to him. But for right now, yeah, after that incident, the attacks would only pick up from there. So at some point, both Danny and George were levitated off the ground and thrown. Red eyes were beginning to appear in the windows, and both Danny and George reported seeing a pig-like monster with fangs. Now, the priest I had mentioned earlier, he'd begun going through a cycle of flu-like symptoms, and he finally broke down, called the family, gave them a warning of what was going on, and then after some back and forth, he decided he was going to reach out to the local bishop for help. Now, I'm not going to pretend to understand Catholicism, but I do know that bishop is a big word. So the bishop ultimately told the priest to chill the fuck out. Apparently, he was of the opinion that the priest was experiencing a big case of the bullshits and didn't want to pursue the matter any further. Now, around the same time, there was a situation when the daughter came running into her parents' bedroom saying, Jordy needs to talk to you, and he's got the biggest pig you've ever seen. Now, obviously, George and Kathy freaked out because they don't know anybody named Jordy, and there was potentially a big-ass pig loose in their house, which honestly sounds worse than being haunted.
I don't know what you want to deal with a giant friggin' pig or a demon. I mean,
yeah, well, I mean, one of them's going to shit for sure. The other one, who knows? I don't know. I mean, obviously, ghost shit probably smells bad. That's why I was smelling so bad in their house. But like,
I never understood that part. Like, they were saying the thing was like shitting, but I don't know the term to say it. Like, I've never heard of a ghost or a spirit or whatever having some sort of excrement or whatever. It's just strange.
Oh, no, that was something I just threw into the story there, man.
Okay.
That's not something they were.
Well, I thought you said something earlier.
I'm just saying
about the house, like shitting on them. Okay.
Since the house smells bad,
yeah.
Okay. You're dealing with quite a petty asshole. So if you're going to haunt a house, you're a petty ass ghost, dude. And if you're a petty ass ghost, chances are you're shitting somewhere you shouldn't be shitting because that's just what bastards do.
Yeah. Okay. When you said that earlier, I was kind of just like, I was like, I've never heard that part where the ghost was supposedly shitting in the house. It had to have been like an animal or something.
Yeah. So, well, I will say, not included in my story is a throwaway line from the book where George describes seeing some green stuff in the boathouse. He called that poltergeist vomit. That's just, since we're on the topic, I wasn't even going to bring it up, but there's
ectoplasm.
That. So yeah, like the Slimer just passed through you, and now you got all the goo on him or whatever. So now, a few nights after the Jordy incident, something attacked the boys. Their beds were being thrown up and down, and George could hear this happening, but he was paralyzed and he was sucked to his bed. And when he looked over for his wife for help, she was levitating off the mattress. When the boys broke free, they came in screaming about a faceless monster trying to grab them. The entire family had been having a nightmare, but this was the final straw. George and Kathy gathered their children, rushed out of their house, got in the family van, and dipped out. They vowed to never spend another day inside the monstrosity. So, before we move on to some of the speculation about what happened, I think it's important to mention that after the news had spread about the miraculous events surrounding the situation and why the DeFeo house was going back on the market, their local Channel 5 news team ran a story on it. So they obviously contacted the Lutz family and they invited paranormal investigators and psychics to spend the night with their camera crew to see if anything would happen. Now, two of the people they invited were Ed and Lorraine Warren. Now, if you're not familiar with them, they are world renowned bullshitters who masqueraded around the country selling ghost stories like they were crack dealers in the 80s.
Grifters.
And if you've watched any like modern day possession movie that begins with based on a true story, chances are it was loosely based on air quotes their investigations. The reporter, who was actually, I think, the only neutral person involved in any of this, didn't recall anything strange happening to him directly, and he didn't see any evidence of anything going on. But he did make a note that his cameraman, who was relatively fit guy who had been to like other countries doing war coverage, things like that, began running out of breath, and he said his heart felt heavy while he was climbing the stairs. Now, the Warrens allegedly took a photo of a ghost boy who was like peeking his head around the door. One of their assistants would come forward and basically debunk all of their work. Now, the Anson and at least George and Kathy Lutz have maintained that everyone who has lived in that house has experiences some strange occurrences. That's a patently false statement. In fact, according to the neighbors and some of the people who have lived there, no one that they know has had a problem since the Lutz family moved out. Now, Anson, the author of the book, has come forward and to say that the only reason he agreed to write the story is because the priest spoke to him directly and confidentially and supported the Lutz family story. The priest would eventually come forward to identify himself and get a gentleman by the name of Ray. Seemed like a pretty decent guy, and he denied the entire thing. And for what it's worth, the Catholic Church has also released a statement vehemently denying the entire thing and has it listed as one of the many hoaxes on its official website. But it's the Catholic Church, and they have vehemently denied many things, and they're absolute bastards. So take that with a grain of salt. Now, George Lutz is, he was known to have an affinity for the occult, which kind of adds to the speculation that he made up the whole thing, hoping to make some money off of it. And then I think it goes without saying that the Warrens, Jay Anson, and at least George and Kathy Lutz all made a significant amount of money on the story, the book, and the movie. And from what I can tell, as mentioned earlier, Danny's probably one of the only kids to come forward out and actually talk about this publicly. And my heart really goes out to the guy. I mean, he describes his parents going to any media outlet that would talk to them, and he and his siblings were dropped off at Catholic school where he talks about being beaten up by nuns, and there were priests who were performing routine exorcism on him because I guess he was haunted. Danny ended up leaving home at 15 because George was an asshole and his mom kind of sucked too. And he goes on record as saying George could move things with his mind in the documentary. And he actually tells a pretty good story about how he went in and saw his stepdad moving a wrench with his mind. So there's a lot of stuff going on with this story. And some people really believe it's haunted. Some people look at the story and go, okay, something drove the Defoe boy crazy and made him kill his family. And obviously it lingered and hit the Lutz family, and that's why they ended up being as haunted as they were. you have pretty clear evidence that they were lying, or I shouldn't say that they were lying. You have pretty clear evidence that they were incentivized to lie and make up this statement. And the people that are surrounded by them that support the statement are known grifters.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky one. It really is, because this is a story that has infiltrated pop culture since 1975. Everyone's been touched by this story. And
I kind of had my own
Yeah.
theory without trying to discredit anything that they'd said, but like, I've always kind of wondered, they didn't know the back history of the house when they fell in love with it and they wanted it. So they moved in and realized that they couldn't afford it. And then they're like, oh shit, we need to get out of here. So what did they do? They just made up the story just so they could try and get out of the place. I don't know how that worked back in the 70s. I figured you can't just get out of the loan to buy the house or something, but I don't know.
So that's a theory that's been floated out there several times, and financial struggles make a lot of sense. It really does. Now, the naysayers, I guess, the people who would detract from that would say they were only there for 28 days. How would they, the bank they wouldn't have been foreclosed on because they wouldn't have enough time to have paid their second mortgage, let alone their first mortgage. And I think that's a silly argument at best, because I've bought things that I know that I couldn't afford, and now have I gone around saying my car was haunted? No, absolutely not. But you make bad financial decisions. I think that's there. Now, I do think that George probably planned this out. I think that he wanted to create this story, and I think that he wanted to sell it, because he was into the occult. He did look at this house like, man, maybe I can get a deal on this, right? And then they created this whole fictional event that happened. Their kids are young enough to be suggestible. It's a fun story. It's one that I've always found fascinating.
I've always liked the idea of it being haunted, and I that's fucked up to say, but like thinking that something like that really did happen, like kind of like I want to believe, but
Yes.
at the same time, it's like I never believed that. Like, I've watched the movie, actually liked the movie, but it just sounded so ridiculously over the top that the gates of hell happened here at this house, but never happened again. Like,
Yeah, right. Like there was a red moon.
yeah, like all this stuff happened.
Saturn lined up perfectly.
Like, I'm pretty sure, like, the end of the movie, and I don't talk about the new one with Ryan Reynolds or whatever, which I don't think that one was a terrible one either. I guess I don't really remember that one, but the original one isn't like a portal opened up in there, like starting to like suck shit in or some shit when they're trying to escape the house at the end, and it doesn't want to let them leave.
Oh my God, I instantly forgot all about the movie now that you asked me. I know at the end of Poltergeist,
Yeah,
the portal opened up and like fucking
Yeah.
caskets and shit came flying out, man.
I feel like at the end though, like there was like a light or one, and they were trying to escape the house and they had to get in the car and drive away. I could be mistaken and thinking of Poltergeist, but I'm pretty sure it was the end of whatever, because it had like not Josh Brolin, but whatever his dad's name is. He was the George of that movie. But no,
It was a pit of black sludge.
okay.
So there was like, it was following him and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a good movie, man. It is. It is a good 70s horror film.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that they did a good job making that movie. Now the Ryan Reynolds ones, probably skip out on that one. Yeah, that's one of the. I'm actually a pretty big Ryan. I think like most of the world, I'm a pretty big Ryan Reynolds fan.
Yeah.
But that movie really did seem like an excuse for him to just take his shirt off.
The
It was almost like it was an underwear ad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that song that came out, like she looks so perfect standing there in American Apparel underwear. That was sold as a rock song, but was clearly well, I shouldn't say rock song, pop song. It was clearly a commercial.
Watch Ryan Reynolds
Yeah,
chop
that's
some
kind of how
wood
I
down
felt about that movie.
by the boathouse with no shirt on, and then walk around looking at his family with an axe with no shirt on. What do you remember about that movie? Ryan Reynolds and abs.
Incredible abs. Very menacing. Very menacing. Clearly did a lot of sit-ups and had a great fast.
No, that's all I really remember about that movie, to be 100% honest, was he played George, and I remember he had an axe and everything, and I almost felt like it was almost like The Shining to an extent, like he walked around with an axe. He's possessed. So.
Oh, that was another good story. I love The Shining. That was actually a couple of great films with that one. Mm-hmm. Stephen King's fucking terrible, man. God, I hate him. I hate all of his movies. I hate reading his stories. I just can't. I don't like living in a world where Stephen King exists, if I'm being honest with you. Now, one of the fun conversations I like to have is about ghosts. Now, do you think ghosts are real?
That is a very slippery slope that I am not going to mention on air.
Okay,
no, I'm just fucking with you. Yes and no. And I mean that in the sense of, I don't feel like people are haunted by like someone that used to live here, or someone you go to a cemetery, because you're by someone's grave, their spirit's around there. If you believe in an afterlife, their spirit should be fucking gone. Why would they linger around? Oh, they're just lost souls, this and that. I think the energies are what's here. And I don't know if that's a soul, I don't know if it's a ghost or whatever it is. I think the things that we interact with are some sort of an energy, if that makes any sort of sense. I don't know if it's like, sometimes it's negative, sometimes it's this and that. And I've always wondered, maybe throwing out the whole interdimensional thing, maybe when people see shadow people, or when they see these other figures or interact with these things, they're not actually ghosts in the sense of dead spirits or whatever, but they're actually something from another plane of existence that we don't see yet, but kind of bleeds into our world. That's my weird hypothesis.
That's a good. I actually like that explanation. Now we've talked about this several times on our show. Now, I've had, and it's actually, so you're talking about paranormal experiences on your show. So I've only had one strange thing happen to me, and I'm pretty sure I hallucinated it. So I'm not saying, I'm not going on record saying it's real or not. But I remember I was hungover.
Already
I was driving back to my house. Yes, exactly, right. I was driving back to my house, and so at the time it's like I don't want to say an access road, but it was a road that connected two highways. We lived on that road, and I looked over. So it was one of those like early summer mornings where the sun's not quite out yet, but it's like muggy. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It was a perfect day or I shouldn't say perfect. It was an absolutely terrible day to be hungover, because it was, you're sweating immediately. But I'm driving down the road, and I remember I looked over to the right, and I saw a face just standing there staring at me. Freaked me the fuck out. I almost swerved off the road. Came back to it, I looked over, it was gone. Now, that was the only time I've had that experience. Now, there was a situation when I was a kid where my sister played the perfect prank on myself and my cousins, where she moved a doll and made it look like she didn't do it. And we went years thinking that doll was possessed, dude. And she finally came forward with it, I remember, I can still see my cousin's face. We went years without talking, or seeing each other rather. And when I broke it down to him how she did it, it looked like he wanted to punch me in the arm because I ruined the story for him. So,
yeah,
that's fun stuff, man. Now, my co-host, Dan in particular, he's had several experiences that are ghost-like. Yeah, he talks about shadow people and his experiences with that, and he and I have been friends. Well, both co-hosts, John and Dan, we had been friends. They're brothers. They've known each other their entire lives, but I've known them for the last 17 to 18 years. And it was only after we started doing the show that we started talking about some of the stranger things that have happened in our lives. Because it wasn't something that we talked about freely. Who wants to go tell their friends that they're seeing ghosts and shit? You know? So it's a strange conversation to have. And so it's the more I hear and the more I listen to people that talk about their experiences, I'm starting to come around to the idea that maybe there is something out there that is haunting.
I don't disagree there's not
Uh,
something out there. I just, like I said, as far as it being, I don't know what it is. I'm not going to go on record and say I know what it is because I don't think anyone really knows what the fuck it is. But
yeah.
I definitely think these people experience something. Now, obviously, in the case of the Amityville or whatever, I don't know, and even people that I've probably talked to or whatever, they've embellished things here and there. I'm assuming it's just part of it. Also, I don't know if they do it intentionally. Just because if you have a traumatic experience, your mind typically tries to, I don't want to say block certain things, but like you don't remember it exactly how it happened. Your mind has a weird way of trying to like shelter you from that, I think, like a defense mechanism. So, and I've talked about this before, maybe people that have these traumatic events, even like these abductions or whatever, is it actually aliens abducting, or did something really happen when you were a kid and you're saying aliens came into your room and abducted you and did all these things to you? Was it really aliens, or was it like some weird creepy uncle that came in and your brain is processed it as being abducted by aliens? Like, that's just an example. I'm not saying that's what really happened, but like, I've often wondered if maybe our minds themselves are not sheltering us, like shielding us from some sort of weird experiences we've had, and we can only understand it, and that this is the way we make sense of it.
It's a good point. It is. I think that there's enough literature out there that says that you're right. Now, I am curious. So I do want to talk about the podcast a little bit.
Okay.
So there are people who are going to be listening to this that are probably thinking about starting a podcast. And they want to probably do something similar to what you're doing. I'll even maybe something similar to what I'm doing. What has been, what do you think the best place for somebody to start with that is?
To start a podcast? Basically, I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. So I go back and listen to the old episodes and I'm kind of like, hate them. They just don't sound good. Didn't know what I was doing. It was weird to talk to strangers or anything like that, especially when you don't. I'm not a very outgoing person. So if you already have a personality where you like going out and talking to people all the time and you never meet a stranger, it's easier to do that. Myself, I'm always more of a quiet, reserved. I'm going to hang in the back of the room and observe everybody else and not be the social butterfly or whatever. Which is strange because my old band, I'm actually rocking one of our old shirts. I was the vocalist of a band, so I've always had to be the one on stage talking to people, so it's awkward as general. I don't like talking to people really, but here I am, the front man, and hosting a friggin' podcast. But like I said earlier, this is the first time I've been face to face really for this podcast, as far as interviewing with people. But tips wise, a lot of people have been getting the equipment, it's like the podcasting equipment, the Rodecaster and stuff like that. I think you want to make sure you have a decent, clear enough sound, I think. And this is just me being a music person, but I like when you don't have to continually turn each person up. Like if one person's speaking and then a guest speaks, I've noticed on other podcasts, and again, pet peeve, but like the person's volume is so low that you have to turn up to hear what they're saying, and then the other person comes back on, they're super loud, and you have to turn it back down, try and equal out your levels. And then having a topic, like if you want to do a podcast like this, it is so hard to find guests. I never thought it would have been as hard as it is to find guests. Now, I advertise every episode losing my voice. And I always say, send an email to Tinfoil Tales Podcast, gmail.com. I have been contacted through that email maybe 24 times. I'm in like 70 something episodes now. And I've only been emailed by people less than 24 times, I'd say. Most of the people I find is because I make posts in groups or on Reddit or something. Like I have to search for the guest. At this point, going on 2 years, I thought I'd be contacted by people. I have been getting contacted by people, but it's not because they're listening to the episodes and they reach out to me. The people that contact me is because they see my posts and they want to come on the show, or they've just, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's weird to interview people.
It's a proactive approach.
Yeah. It's weird for me. Like, I thought at this point, when I got doing the podcast, I didn't understand it was going to be more of a struggle. And I thought, well, everyone's got some sort of weird stories to talk about or whatever. I'm sure they've all had something strange. Most people don't even want to talk about it. I was like, well, it's a podcast. No one's going to see you. We can change your name. Like, talk about it. Weird experiences.
There's some anonymity there, yeah.
And then a lot of people, they'll comment something, hey, you want to come on the show? Nothing. I've got people booked right now that I'm still trying to get to confirm. Like, I get stuff booked a lot, and a lot of people ghost me. I mean, I guess I believe in ghosts in the sense that about 50% of my guests are ghosts because they disappear.
People will tip out. And I will say, you have an impressive catalog of people on there. And I saw your post about like what you have pre-recorded and ready to jump whenever you're ready to do it, man. It's incredible. So I found personally, so anyone who actually goes through and wants to listen to real-time progression of podcast quality, to check out our show, because you will hear our first scattered-brained episode with terrible audio. And then you'll come across our 15th, 16th episode where it actually sounds like we know what we're doing. Now, I found the Reddit community in general to be extremely helpful, especially when it comes to finding other guests and things like that. Because it's the subreddit podcast exchange, our guest podcast exchange, something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head, where we found all of our guests, and we haven't found any, we've only had, of the guests we've had 2 bad experiences, where one was not a very good fit for what we do in our show. Because our show is personality driven. It is humor driven. It is at least one of us taking it seriously, and then 2 of us shitting on the rest of the topic. And each episode it rotates whoever's the serious one, and it's not intentional. It's just the way our personalities work. But so that would be my tip for anybody going out there who wants to start one. Check out Reddit. It's a good place to find some guests, because there are as many people as there are who don't want to share their stories. There's just as many people out there who do want the world to see who they are and who do want to talk about them, even if it's not topic specific. Like, I know you're primarily interview driven. We're story driven.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably a little bit easier for us to get some interchangeability with guest wise, because we don't need you to come on and tell a story. Now, granted, I will say when you came on our show, you did a fantastic job telling your story. It was wonderful. And we didn't have to do a lot of the work on that one. So we do have that every once in a while. But that would be my tip for anybody out there who wants to actually take some time and do that. And then to have a schedule, to know what your schedule is so you can have self-imposed deadlines, would be my second tip.
I suggest, I probably shouldn't say this on air, you can use Reaper as your DAW, however you want to call it, to edit and mix and stuff like that. I don't know what a lot of people use for podcasts. I have all this stuff, again, for music purposes. And Reaper is free in the sense that you get a free trial, and after your 60 days are up, it will ask you if you would like to purchase it. And if you say you're still evaluating it, they'll let you continue to evaluate it for free. And it'll just ask you again if you would like to purchase it, and you just keep saying you're still evaluating. Because I've been evaluating it because I'm not sure I want to buy it, because I've been evaluating it for 2 years now. I think I'm going to buy it, but I'm just not sure yet. Still want to keep evaluating it. So
yeah, I've thought about evaluating it myself.
It's worth evaluating.
Right.
Yes. But
and we'll use for heavy edits, which we very rarely do. We usually just every once in a while there will be a joke that we don't want to be associated with that gets made that we'll edit out. And so we'll use Audacity, and then within our there's a few different platforms, but the one that we've been using is called StreamYard. You can't actually edit some of that out. It's a pain in the ass, but you can't edit some of the stuff out through the platform that you're on.
Yeah. So I've been used to using stuff like Reaper for a long time, just because music and all the other stuff. So I was already kind of familiar with what needed to happen, how things go, and there's a lot of little plugins and stuff. Someone else suggested I use Audacity, so I downloaded it. I was like, this stuff looks like it's from 1998 or some shit. It's like,
oh, dude, it screams dial-up internet. That tone, it feels like I'm hearing that every time I touch it. Now, I do. It's one of the other things I wanted to ask you about. And I love this about your show, but I'm always curious, like, who's the craziest person that you've talked to so far? And are you willing to talk about that on your show? If not, dude, totally cut it out. I'm okay with that.
We can talk about that off air.
Okay. No, I don't want to put you on the spot or anything. I just listen. I'm like, man, this is some of the stuff's out there.
No, I've said it before too, and like, I don't want to offend any of the guests. So
no, you're good, man.
it is what it is, but like, it comes with the territory. Like, literally, the name is derived from tinfoil hat. Literally, people think you're a crazy person.
Yeah.
So
now you can so on. I'm just assuming you're editing this part out. You can press B. It'll timestamp that for you.
press B.
Yeah, if you press B on your keyboard,
Okay.
there'll be a little timestamp in there when you go back to edit it.
Nice.
But well, hey man, I've really enjoyed you taking the time to talk with me tonight. So I really do appreciate that.
Yeah, not a problem. Loved having you on. Enjoyed talking with you guys on your show. For anyone out there listening, where you want to let them know where they can find you guys at?
Yeah, so we are the Founding Lore Fathers. We are on Spotify, Apple, and Amazon. We've got, I think we got probably about 18, 19 shows recorded. We've probably released 17 of them so far. It's a fun show. If you want to learn fun facts about different cryptids or different conspiracy theories, it's a good spot to be there. And we do our best not to take ourselves seriously.
That's something that I've struggled with, is I'm too serious, and I'm not a very serious person, which is funny, but like on the show, I come off too serious. I don't know.
You have resting serious face, Brandon.
Yeah. I have resting.
You can't avoid
Literally
it.
everyone will ask me, what's wrong? Why do you look mad? Like, I'm not mad.
Oh, dude, that sucks, man. That sucks. Like I feel offended for you.
I have permanent resting bitch face. So.
There you go. You heard it here first, everybody. No, I mean, that's a shame. But not, listening to your show, this isn't a critique, because I find it to be very endearing, is that you come on and you let your guests talk. You don't interfere with it. And that's fantastic, man. So anyone who says anything negative about that, they suck. They don't need to be a part of it anyway.
I don't like listening to myself talk anyways. I hate the sound of my voice. So
yeah,
I'm just giving them a platform to talk. That's all it is.
I'm actually always shocked when I hear my voice. I talk so much you'd think I'd be used to hearing it. But I don't. I always hear it. I go, wow, that's what I sound like. How about that? Can't believe people are willing to listen to what I have to say.
No, no one ever sounds like what they think they sound like.
No, not at all, man. It's a fun little thing that we all have to deal with.
But no,
but yeah.
Hey, as long as we enjoy what we're doing, it's all that matters.
Oh yes, sir. And I wish the best of luck to you and in your endeavors in this situation, man. Because you're doing really good work.
I do want one more point to tell people, and you're doing a podcast. Do not get over infatuated with the numbers. I've noticed a lot of people are struggling with podcasting. They think they have to be hitting, oh, I'm not getting this many downloads. I'm not getting it. If you put out good content, as long as you keep promoting it, which I don't promote anything really, so I can't really speak on how well it does, but if you put out good content and you can be consistent with it, I think eventually it'll start growing. Like my show's just a little pissant show, but I've got a little decent little steady stream of downloads or whatever that I get. So it's not anything amazing, but I know some people start a podcast. I think they're supposed to be getting like friggin' 10 million downloads a week. I'm like, I mean, it would be nice, but set your goals to actually something achievable. So
That's actually a very good point there, Brandon. So I know, the promotion that we have done for our show has been me going online and asking for, see if anybody wants to listen or anybody wants to be a guest, I should say.
mm-hmm.
Now from there, and putting it on Spotify and Amazon and Apple has helped. But from there, we have been able to garner a pretty decent, for a show that only that has less than 20 episodes. We've been able to gather a pretty decent little following.
Yeah.
And are we Joe Rogan? Are we, pardon my take? Absolutely not. No. And there's very, very small chance that we'll ever even look at half those numbers, right? But we do. We have fans in Canada. We have fans in India. We have fans in America. There are women who listen to us talk about weird shit on the internet. But it happens.
No.
Yeah, and you're right. You shouldn't stress out about that. Like you can't. Now, you get 4 or 5 years into it, you got 10 people listening, maybe change it up a bit. But if you're starting out, it's just a matter of grinding through it, putting out episodes. Like you said, content matters.
Yeah. I said my numbers, if you look at the amount of Spotify followers to the amount of downloads, like there's something wonky about it, but it is what it is. So
yeah, well, we don't see. I don't download anything. I just listen. I stream it, and so that that adds into that. So like I know I'm one of your followers, but you probably don't see any of my downloads because I don't download anything. I just listen.
I don't know if they count downloads or streams as a stream. That's what's strange. Like it's I know when I switched platforms, I went from RSS to Red Circle. I've been getting a lot more quote unquote downloads instantly since I switched hosting services, and I don't know how that's possible because everything's been the same. It's just a different host, so I don't know where they come up with their numbers. So, like I literally doubled my downloads and like just literally switching over by one day. Like the amount of stuff just started doubling. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, maybe they were counting streams instead of the actual downloads, rather.
Yeah, I have no idea how it works, but that's all I got for anyone out there. If you have any other questions or whatever, don't ask me because I'm a Joe Nobody.
Well, there you go, man. Yeah. You can reach out to us. You can find us somewhere. Just leave a comment somewhere on all that. But I hope you enjoy your night, Brandon.
Hey,
thanks for having me again.
Not a problem. Thanks for coming on here and talking with me. You have a good night.
Remember, the truth lies in the stories we share, the connections we make. Stay curious, stay open-minded. Thank you all for joining us on this journey, and until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep exploring the unknown. Good night, everyone.